I want to start by saying something clearly, so there's no confusion about what kind of story this is. I am not here to tell you my children are bad people. They are not bad people. They are people who were struggling and who had a mother who loved them, and who, when they came to her with their struggles, did what mothers do. She helped. I helped. I helped with the house, and I helped with the money, and I helped in every way I could think to help, because that is what I had spent 50 years doing, and I did not know how to do anything else. What I did not know, and what I want to tell you about, is what happens when you spend 50 years helping everyone around you and wake up at 73 with nothing left to help with. When the account is empty, when the house is gone, when the children you built your entire life around are busy with their own lives, as they should be, as you raised them to be, and you are sitting in a rented room in Cincinnati, Ohio, doing the math on a Social Security check that does not add up to a life. That is the story I want to tell. Not because it is bitter, it isn't. Not because I want sympathy, I don't. Because I think there are women watching this right now who are sitting in their own versions of that rented room, doing their own version of that math, wondering if this is simply what the end of a life looks like when you gave most of it away. It is not. I promise you, it is not. My name is Dorothy. I am 73 years old. I live in Dumagete City in the Philippines. And what I found here, on the other side of losing everything I had spent 50 years building, is the first life I have ever lived that was entirely, specifically, undeniably mine. Let me tell you about the house, because it is the center of the story and it deserves to be told honestly. I bought that house in 1987 with my husband Frank, who died in 2011, and who was the kind of man who fixed things without being asked and remembered everyone's birthday and left the world genuinely better than he found it. We paid it off in 2003. It was a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street in Cincinnati with a maple tree in the front yard that turned the most extraordinary color every October, and a kitchen I had spent 30 years making exactly right. When Frank died, the house became mine. Just mine. And for about 2 years, it was also grief. Every room full of him, every corner holding something that required walking past carefully. But it was mine. Paid off, solid, real. The one thing I had that was certain. My daughter Kimberly came to me in 2014 with her husband and their 2 children. He had lost his job. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. They were going to lose their house if something didn't change. And I had a house, paid off, just me in it. I want to be precise about what happened next because I think the precision matters. Nobody put a gun to my head. Nobody forced me. Kimberly didn't manipulate me or deceive me or take advantage in any way you could point to clearly and name. She came to me in genuine need, and I made a genuine choice. I signed the house over to her. I moved into the smaller bedroom. I told myself this was practical. The house was too big for one person anyway. It made sense for a family to be in it. I could help with the grandchildren. We would all be together. And for 3 years, that worked. Imperfectly, in the way that multi-generational living always works imperfectly, with tensions about the kitchen and the noise and the way I liked things that they didn't like, and vice versa, but it worked. I was useful. I helped with school pickups and cooking, and the 10,000 small tasks that a working family with 2 children needs done. I felt, those 3 years, that I had made the right choice. Then Kimberly's husband got a job offer in Phoenix. A good one, too good to turn down, the kind you move your whole life for. And they moved, and they took the children, and they sold my house. Not our house. My house. The house Frank and I had paid off. The house with the maple tree. They sold it, paid off their debt, put the rest toward a down payment in Phoenix. I received, from the proceeds, enough to cover a security deposit and 3 months' rent on a 1-bedroom apartment. Kimberly cried when she told me. She said she was sorry. I believe she meant it. I also believe that meaning something and doing it anyway is a very particular kind of being sorry, and that I was the one who would be living with the consequences. I moved into the apartment in March of 2018. I was 67 years old. My Social Security was $1,280 a month. The apartment was $795. I had $41,000 in savings that I had spent 30 years accumulating and that I watched over the next 4 years drain away in the specific slow way that happens when your income and your expenses are close enough that every unexpected cost, a medical bill, a car repair, a heating issue in February, tips you backward. By 2022, I had $11,000 left. I was 71 years old. I did the math, and the math said I had perhaps 18 months before the savings were gone, and I was living on $1,280 a month with $795 in rent and nothing left over for anything that went wrong. I did not tell Kimberly. I did not tell my son Robert, who lived in Portland and called on holidays and was a good person at a considerable distance. I sat with it alone, the way I had been sitting with most things alone for a while, and I thought about what my options were. And the options, when I listed them honestly, were these: move in with one of my children as a dependent, which my entire life had been spent avoiding becoming; find a smaller apartment and eat less and hope nothing went wrong, which was not a plan so much as a postponement of the same crisis; or do something I had never considered doing. The something I had never considered doing was leave. I found the Philippines the way most women my age find things that change their lives, which is by accident at an unreasonable hour. It was 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, and I was watching videos on my tablet, and somewhere between a documentary about someone else's life and an advertisement I didn't ask for, a video appeared of a woman about my age sitting on a small balcony somewhere warm, talking about her monthly expenses. She was paying $260 for her apartment. She was eating fresh fish every morning from a market she walked to. Her medications cost a fraction of what mine cost. She looked unhurried in a way that I had forgotten was available to a person. The particular ease of someone who is not doing arithmetic in her head every time she picks something up. I watched that video 3 times. Then I watched everything else she had ever made. Then I watched every video I could find about Americans retiring in the Philippines, which turned out to be more than I expected and more consistent than I had any right to hope. The numbers kept appearing in variations of the same range: apartments between $220 and $320 a month, food that cost a fraction of Cincinnati prices, healthcare that was affordable and English-speaking and delivered with a warmth that the American system had stopped offering somewhere around the time Frank died. I researched for 3 months. I am not a reckless woman. I spent 30 years as an office manager for a medical practice, and I know how to read information carefully and ask the right questions. I joined expat forums and read everything, including the complaints, especially the complaints, because the complaints tell you more than the endorsements. I made a spreadsheet, of course I made a spreadsheet, that compared my current monthly expenses in Cincinnati to projected expenses in Dumagete, which kept coming up as a city suited to older American women, smaller and calmer than Cebu, with a university that gave it a particular quality of life. The spreadsheet was not close. In Cincinnati, on $1,280 a month, I was losing ground every month. In Dumagete, on $1,280 a month, I would be saving between $500 and $600 every single month. I told Robert first, because Robert was the easier conversation. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Mom, that actually makes sense," which is Robert's version of enthusiasm, and I accepted it as such. I told Kimberly on a Sunday afternoon phone call. She cried again. She said she felt terrible. I told her she didn't need to feel terrible, that I was making a choice I was happy about, which was true in the way that things become true when you decide they are going to be. I sold my car in September. I sold my furniture in October, mostly on Facebook Marketplace to strangers who came and carried it away piece by piece, until the apartment was a set of bare rooms that looked nothing like a life. I kept what fit in 2 suitcases and a carry-on. I flew to the Philippines in November, which Ronnie, a man I'd met in the expat forum who had been in Dumagete for 2 years and who turned out to be a genuinely useful person to know, told me was a good month to arrive because the worst of the typhoon season was ending and the heat was at its most manageable. I landed in Cebu at 2 in the morning, connected to a smaller plane to Dumagete, and walked out of that small airport into warm, dark air that smelled like nothing I had smelled before and everything I had been looking for, and I thought, Dorothy, you are 71 years old and you have no house and no car and no furniture and $11,000 and a suitcase, and for the first time in a very long time, the only person you have to take care of is yourself. It felt, I am not ashamed to tell you, like putting something down. The first month was an education in the specific ways that research does not prepare you for reality. The heat was the first thing. I had read about the heat. Reading about heat and standing inside it are different experiences, and for the first 3 weeks I moved through Dumagete in a state of constant negotiation with my own body, learning the rhythms of when to be outside and when to retreat, learning to slow down in the way the climate insisted on. By the end of the first month, I had stopped fighting it. By the end of the 3rd month, I had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing the sound of a refrigerator, present, background, no longer demanding attention. The second thing was the loneliness, which arrived not as an absence of people, but as a gap between warmth and belonging. Everyone I encountered was kind, genuinely and immediately kind, in a way that I had not experienced in Cincinnati, where kindness was a transaction you built over years of proximity. Here, it was immediate. But immediate kindness and actual belonging are different things, and the months between arriving and belonging were the hardest months. I almost went home at month 2, sitting alone in my apartment in the dark during a brownout with a battery fan, and my own thoughts, genuinely uncertain whether I had made a mistake. What stopped me from going home was a Tuesday morning at the Palenque. I had been going to the market every morning since I arrived, partly because the food was extraordinary, and partly because it gave me a reason to leave the apartment and be somewhere that was happening. On a Tuesday morning in my 8th week, a fish vendor named Lucia, who had sold me bangus every morning for 7 weeks with professional courtesy and nothing more, looked up when I arrived and said, before I had opened my mouth, "The good ones came in this morning. I set some aside for you." She had set some aside for me, a woman I had given money to 7 times a week for 7 weeks. She had been paying attention without my knowing she was paying attention, and she had done something about it. That is such a small thing. I know it is a small thing. But I had spent 4 years in Cincinnati going to the same grocery store and being invisible to everyone in it. And here was a woman who noticed what I bought and saved me the good ones. I went home from the market that morning, and I did not look at flights. I unpacked the last of my suitcase instead. I had been living out of it, I realized, like a person who hasn't fully decided to stay. I put everything in the drawers. I decided to stay. Let me give you the numbers because they are the reason any of this was possible, and you deserve them clearly. My apartment in Dumagete is 1 bedroom on the 2nd floor of a small building in a neighborhood called Piapi, 10 minutes walk from the boulevard and 5 from the Palenque, tiled floors throughout, ceiling fans, a wall unit in the bedroom I run at night, a small balcony where I have a chair and a pot of something Marisol, who I will tell you about in a moment, planted without asking, and which is flowering in a color I don't have a name for. The rent is 13,000 pesos a month. At current rates, that is $230. In Cincinnati, I was paying $795. That single difference is the foundation of everything else. Electricity runs me about $50 a month. Water is $7. Internet, which I need for the Sunday calls with Robert and the Thursday calls with Kimberly, which have become easier and warmer now that there is distance and perspective between us, is $30. Food, market shopping 3 mornings a week, plus eating out 4 or 5 evenings, because eating out here costs less than cooking at home in America, runs $85 a month. My medications, a blood pressure pill, and a thyroid prescription I have taken for 11 years cost $21 a month at the pharmacy 2 blocks from my building. In Cincinnati, the same prescriptions with Medicare Part D cost me $79. Marisol, who comes 4 times a week and has transformed both my apartment and my understanding of what it means to be looked after, costs $52 a month. She is 56, has a daughter studying nursing, has strong opinions about where things should go in a kitchen, and has been wrong about none of them. She knows which days I sleep late and adjusts her arrival accordingly. She knows I prefer my coffee strong and has never once made it weak. She brought me soup without being asked when I had a cold in March, and sat with me for 20 minutes while I drank it, and left without making anything of it. In Cincinnati, I was paying $795 in rent and eating alone every night, and doing everything myself, and watching my savings disappear. Here I am paying $230 in rent and eating well, and being looked after by a woman who brings me soup and plants things on my balcony without asking, and I am saving $580 every month. Let me say that one more time because I want it to be completely clear. On $1,280 a month in Social Security, the same income that was slowly bankrupting me in Ohio, I am saving $580 every month in the Philippines. I have rebuilt my savings to just over $27,000 in 2 years, on Social Security, on the income that in Cincinnati was not enough. I want to tell you what the days are like now, because the days are the point, and I think people don't say enough about the actual texture of the days. I wake up at 5:45 usually. The street starts early, and the light comes in without apology. I make coffee, real Baracco coffee, locally grown, the kind that makes everything you drank before seem like a practice run. And I take it to the balcony. I sit for 20 minutes and I do not manage anything. I watch the street, tricycles, a vendor with a cart of something covered in cloth, school children appearing in their uniforms, the day beginning without requiring anything of me yet. Then the palenque if I need it, where Lucia still saves me the good fish, and where I have, over 2 years, accumulated the kind of vendor relationships that make a city feel like yours. Nanay Beth, with the vegetables, who taught me what to do with bitter melon. Jun with the fruit, who knows I'll pay slightly more for the small, sweet Lakatan bananas and sets them aside without being asked. 3 mornings a week, I volunteer at a reading program near Silliman University, which Marisol's daughter told me about, and which I joined because I had 30 years of office management experience and a need to be useful, and the program needed someone who could handle the administrative side of things that the volunteers who actually sat with the children didn't have time for. So I organize, I track, I make the spreadsheets that tell us which children are coming, how they're progressing, what books they've finished. It is the most satisfying use of the skills I spent 30 years building in a medical practice, and it costs me nothing and gives me more than I expected. Afternoons I slow down because the heat requires it, and I have learned to obey. I read. I write actual letters to my grandchildren in Phoenix on real paper, which they find exotic, and which their mother reads to them because they are 6 and 8, and reading paper letters from a grandmother in the Philippines is apparently a very interesting thing to be doing. Kimberly told me on our last call that my older granddaughter has started writing letters back. I received the first one last month. It was 3 sentences long and contained a drawing of what I was told was me on my balcony, though it looked more like a surprised rectangle. I have it on my refrigerator. Evenings, I walk the boulevard. Every evening, almost without exception. The boulevard in Dumagete at 6 o'clock is one of the better arguments for being alive. The families, the students, the chessmen who have claimed their tables for the evening, the vendors selling banana Q and grilled corn, the light doing extraordinary things to the water before it drops to dark. I have a bench I favor. I have neighbors on that bench, not friends exactly, not yet, but people who nod and whose faces I know and whose absence I would notice. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, the beginning of everything. I want to address some things honestly because I said at the beginning that I would tell you the whole truth, and I meant it. The hardest thing is not what you think. It is not the heat which you adapt to. It is not the visa paperwork which you hire an agent for and stop thinking about. It is not even the loneliness of the early months, which resolves into belonging if you stay patient and keep showing up. The hardest thing is the grandchildren. I watched my granddaughter learn to ride a bike on a video call. I watched my grandson's school play through a screen in my apartment in the Philippines at 6 in the morning because of the time difference, sitting in the dark with my coffee, watching a 7-year-old be a narrator in a school play about the seasons. I was not there in a folding chair in a school gymnasium. I was here in the dark, and I cried quietly so I wouldn't disturb the recording. That is the cost. It is real. It is not going to get smaller. You learn to carry it the way you learn to carry anything that does not have a solution, not by making it lighter, but by building yourself strong enough that you can hold it without it taking everything else down with it. And I will tell you what helps, which is this. Kimberly calls more now than she did when I was in Cincinnati. Something about the distance made her start calling. Something about knowing I was genuinely far away made her start showing up in the ways she had stopped showing up when I was just a drive away and therefore always available. We talk on Thursdays and she tells me about the kids, and I tell her about the boulevard and Lucia and the drawing on my refrigerator. And we are, 2 years into this arrangement, better at being mother and daughter than we were when we lived in the same house. I do not know what to do with that. I have decided to simply be grateful for it. There is one more thing I want to say, because I think it is the most important thing and the hardest to say, and the thing most likely to be true for some of you watching this. I gave that house away because I did not believe I deserved to keep it. Not consciously. I would not have said that out loud. But somewhere in the 50 years of taking care of everyone else, somewhere in the long practice of putting everyone else's needs in front of my own, I had developed a belief, quiet, foundational, so much a part of me I couldn't see it, that my own needs were what was left over, that my comfort, my security, my future, were things you got to after everyone else's were handled. The house was the final expression of that belief. Of course I gave it away. What was it for, if not to help my children? What was I for, if not to help my children? And then I was 71 in a rented room with $11,000 and a Social Security check that didn't add up. And for the first time in 50 years, I was forced to ask the question I had never once asked myself directly. Not what does everyone else need? What do I need? What do I actually need? And is there a version of my life in which I am allowed to build it? The Philippines was my answer to that question. Not because it is paradise, which it is not, but because it was possible, and it was mine, and no one had any claim on it but me. No one could ask me to sign it over. No one was going to come to me with a need that required me to give it up. It was, for the first time in 50 years, just mine. I wake up every morning in an apartment I have chosen, in a city I have come to love, with coffee I have made myself, on a balcony with a plant someone put there as an act of care, with no expectation of return. I walk to a market where a woman saves me the good fish. I sit at a desk and make spreadsheets for children who are learning to read. I walk a boulevard in the evening, and the light goes gold over the water, and I think about Frank, and I think about my grandchildren, And I think about the maple tree I no longer have, and the life I gave away piece by piece, and the life I found, at 73, on the other side of having nothing left to give. It is the best life I have ever lived. Not the easiest, not the most comfortable, the best. If you are sitting somewhere right now with your own version of the math that doesn't add up, your own version of the room that is too small and the account that is too low, and the question of whether this is simply what you deserve after a life spent giving everything away, I want you to hear this. You are not what is left over. You were never what was left over. There is a life on the other side of that belief, and it costs $230 a month in rent and smells like Baracco coffee and the sea. Go find it. You have earned it more than you know.